right. Morning, everybody. Does everybody have their coffee? Thank you for joining us this morning. We're delighted to have you, and this is going to be an interesting conversation and very timely. First thing to let everybody know is you are being recorded. So just remember that, and this will be edited. I think the beginning will be edited out and will be posted on our website as soon as we can get it there. Second thing I want to do is just remind folks what the Democratic Women's Club is. Created more than 50 years ago, basically to give women a chance to participate in the party, Democratic Party. And we're an independent chartered club of the California Democratic Party. And we have everyone, as you can see that Mike Rodkin is a member, can join and participate in this club. And now we're going to have a couple of actions from the membership. If those of you who are members of the club will help us with this vote, and if you're not a member, please don't vote. The first issue we have before the membership is a vote to about Congressman Anna Eshoo. The board recommends that we endorse her for her race, and we're looking for a vote of the membership who would join us in that.
If I could clarify, we've already endorsed her, and this is now a question of donating money on following that endorsement.
Okay, I thought that was a conversation earlier. All right, so let's talk about giving her a contribution of $250. All members in favor of—
But we should have a motion first. I'll move that we send her $250.
I'm going home.
Sorry, I move we said that we give Anna Eshoo $250 in support of her campaign.
Thank you.
Need a second from somebody.
Anybody?
Looks like Karen Darling has seconded.
Karen Darling. Okay, now can we do the vote?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor, hand up, please. Anyone opposed? Wait, hold them up, or we have to count this?
We'll just, yes, I'll do a quick count.
Okay. I'll tell you, I haven't finished my first cup of coffee yet. That's my only excuse.
And some people are not showing their video, so we can't. But as far as, go ahead, I've got the count now and ask for the nose.
Okay. Anyone opposed to $250 contribution to Anna Eshoo?
I see no opposition, so
okay.
It carries.
Thank you. The next bit of business is there's a candidate running for city council in a special election, and I'm going to do my best on this name. It's Vanessa Quiroz Carter, and the election's in early December, and the board has recommended an endorsement of Vanessa for city council in Watsonville.
And $100 contribution to her campaign.
We're going to combine those. Okay.
Yes, in one vote.
All right. Then
I so move.
Yes, I was asking for that next. Anybody move that? Mike's got it. Second.
Sarah Smith has her hand up.
Okay. All those in favor. Mike must be counting.
I am. Okay.
All those opposed. Two action items done. Awesome. All right. Next, I just want to mention, I'll mention it again. Our next forum is going to be on November 20th, and it's going to be Build Back Better Infrastructure. We're going to look at the bill that's going through DC now. And we're also going to talk about the prospect for the midterm elections. Congressman Panetta has agreed to participate in that, and we have an invitation out to Congresswoman Eshoo. So put that on your calendars for November 20th, and there'll be more information coming. Okay, today's forum, we're looking at redistricting, which is critically important because every 10 years following the census, the jurisdictions around the US are redistricted to roughly equalize the number of voters represented by various public officials. And as you probably know, it's a heated political issue this year because of Republican legislative plans in over 20 states to manipulate or gerrymander district lines for partisan purposes rather than the new lines being drawn consistent with preserving communities of common interest, which we just heard about, Joe. In California, our population count has decreased in the last census. We're going to lose one congressional seat, and that means we're going to lose one electoral vote. And our state representative district lines are also on the table. Today's talk is about looking much closer to home, discussing the county redistricting based on population, and the possibility of the city of Santa Cruz moving to district elections in response to a lawsuit over Latinx voting rights. We have a large panel of experts, and we're going to look forward to their presentations and discussion at the end of the forum. First, we're going to look at the county-wide redistricting with County Clerk Tricia Weber. Second, we're going to look at the potential of the city of Santa Cruz moving from at-large to district elections for city council with Catherine Bronson and Tony Condotti. And finally, we're going to have the Sandra Brown and former Mayor Terrazas talk to us about the pros and cons of district elections in the city of Santa Cruz. So with that said, we're going to first start with the county redistricting, and I want to introduce County Clerk Tricia Weber. Tricia has worked in the County Clerk and Elections Office since 1998. She's worked in virtually every area of the clerk's office, including clerk services, which include marriage licenses and passports. And she's managed elections, vote by mail processes, voter canvass management, and more. She served as the assistant county clerk starting in 2013 until her appointment as county clerk and registrar of voters in December of 2020. She has a degree in international business from CSU Fresno and a teaching credential from Chapman University. And she has taught kindergarten and special education as well. So Tricia, thank you for joining us today. And for those who are listening, we're going to have a Q&A at the end. So keep that open. And I don't know if we're doing chat, Mike. Are we got a chat going or?
I believe it's open if people like to share. We're not using it for any organized purpose, but people can certainly check the chat, and anything anybody puts in there will go to everyone that's on this call.
Okay, thank you. Tricia, thank you very much for being here.
Great, thank you, Laura Lee. And thank you very much for having me this morning. Just a word of just caution. I will try to stay on all the way through to the end for the question and answer period, but it is our first day of in-person voting for the City of Santa Cruz election. And so my staff knows that unless
Oops, you're breaking up there.
there's a fire, they can't open, come in and let me know. Okay. All right, so I was asked to talk about the county redistricting and just redistricting in general. What?
Tricia, you're breaking up, and I'm wondering if there's a reason that your signals.
It sounds fine to me.
Okay, then I'll be quiet. It must be my mine. Go ahead. Sorry.
She's good.
Maybe the great beyond doesn't. There is a decennial redistricting in order to equalize the population in the districts, and it goes through all districts that have representation go through this redistricting process, all the way from, as we heard, the congressional districts through the state districts down to even sanitation districts and the like, and everything in between. And everybody has different deadlines on when their redistricting has to be turned in. Those new lines come to our office where we do a process known as re-precincting. And that's when we reset all of the new lines, create the new precincts in order to ensure that all voters are voting for the exact things that they are to be voting for. So the county redistricting for the supervisorial lines needs to be completed by December the 15th. That's the date that it was changed to with the delay of the census data coming out. The census data came out in August, and it started this very compressed time frame. The county was required to hold 4 public workshops to take in public input, where there was discussion on communities of interest and other activities and ideas. They were able to take in lines, maps drawn by other people, and I guess I should define who they were. They are the redistricting commission for the county. There was 1 commissioner appointed for each supervisorial district, And that body is who went to all the public workshops and took in all the information and then makes recommendations to be presented to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors will then take those recommendations and go through a series of public hearings, and then they will adopt the final lines. Now, Santa Cruz's population actually did not vary much. And you can, I have it on the website, but there's a website for Redistricting 2021 Santa Cruz County. And on that, they have the criteria on what needs to be looked at, which is districts, the integrity of communities of interest, use easily identifiable boundaries, which like a street or a river, and that the districts should be compact. And then the lines are created in order to try to do that and keep things within a good standard of deviation, within 5%. Well, all of our population change with our current lines were under 5%. So there's not a whole lot of movement that has to be done in order to equalize the population across our supervisorial districts. So there have been 2 recommendations that have been put forth from the Redistricting Commission to the Board of Supervisors. And they involve the harbor area, moving the harbor from District 3 to District 1. The harbor was right now split in both District 1 and District 3, so it was moving it all into District 1. And down in the Watsonville area, the Apple Hill area, moving from District 2 to District 4. Otherwise, there were no other recommendations put for those recommendations were given at the public hearing on October 26th. There will be another public hearing on November 9th and the final one on November the 16th. And people can go ahead and look at those maps on that redistricting website, and I can give you the link for that. I'll put it in the chat. And they can call in or attend those public hearings and give their input. They also can write in. And if anyone has something they want the board to examine and look at, they can submit a map. It can go through the mapping program, which is on the website, or it can be drawn and sent in or dropped off at the county, and then the board will look at that as well. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Thank you. That's a lot of information, and we still have time then to participate for a little bit.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Tricia.
Mhm.
Okay, second, we're going to move to a slightly different topic. We're going to look at the potential of the city of Santa Cruz moving from at-large to district elections for the city council. And our first speaker on this, we have 2 speakers, will be Cassie Bronson, Assistant City Attorney for the city of Santa Cruz. And Cassie has over a decade of experience in advising and representing public entities and private clients in all facets of municipal law and civil litigation, employment law, and public law matters, with a focus on municipal and civil rights liability issues. She joined Atkinson, I'm not going to say this correct, Barrisoni and Condati as an associate in 2014 and became a shareholder in the firm in 2021. She is a graduate of UC Hastings School of Law and UC Santa Barbara. Cassie, thank you for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you. I didn't realize I was going to get an introduction, so that's fun. And my understanding is Tony's here too, and that we were sort of going to tag team the issue of district elections with the city.
So maybe you
There's
should
Tony. We all know Tony. He doesn't need an introduction.
Tony as well.
No,
Hold on a second.
introduce him as well.
All right. So Tony is the managing partner. Help me with the first word.
Atchison.
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 And Barrisone at. The law firm has served as city attorneys for the city of Santa Cruz since 1963. And Tony was appointed as city attorney in 2015. And he has over 30 years of experience in all facets of local government law, including the Brown Act, conflict of interest laws, CEQA, land use, real property, and eminent domain law, also labor and appeals. Okay, there's a quiz question afterwards on all of those. Mr. Condati moved to Santa Cruz and joined in 1993 after 3 years of practice in Southern California, where he served as assistant city attorney for the cities of Mission Viejo and Dana Point. Mr. Condati graduated magna cum laude from the University of Colorado in 1987 and UCLA Law School. Thank you for joining us, Tony. Let you guys figure out how you want to tag team this issue.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. We actually have the order in reverse a little bit. I was going to give a presentation on the why, how we got to where we are right now, and Cassie was going to discuss the process, where we are in the process, and what is coming up next. So
thank you.
With your permission, I will lead things off. So yes, I was asked to talk about why this is in front of the city now, and how the city's responding, and why we're responding in the way we are. And before I get too far into that, what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of background information on the California Voting Rights Act, or I'll call it the CVRA, just to shorten it. That statute provides a right of action to members of a protected class, like a racial minority, where an at-large system impairs the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice, or its ability to influence the outcome of an election. To establish a violation of the CVRA, a plaintiff must be able to demonstrate that racially polarized voting occurs in elections for members of the governing body of the agency, or in elections incorporating other electoral choices by the voters, such as initiatives or referenda. Racially polarized voting means voting in which there's a difference in the choices of candidates or other electoral choices that are preferred by voters in a protected class, and the choices of the voters in the rest of the electorate. And while the CVRA is modeled after the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965, the CVRA lowers the threshold required to establish a voting rights violation. And an amendment to the CVR under the threat of, or under actual CVR on the part of the voters or elected officials to discriminate against a protected class is not required. And for this reason, CVR litigation is purely a statistical exercise. The CVRA manages to recover attorney's fees if it contains a provision whereby if, in response to a claim of racially polarized voting, the agency adopts a resolution of intention to transition to district elections, and thereafter follows the process outlined in the statute to complete the transition, the claimant's entitlement to attorney's fees is capped at $30,000. So back in 2019, in July, the city received a demand letter from a Santa Barbara attorney on behalf of a Travis Roderick, alleging that the city's at-large election system violates the California Voting Rights Act, and demanding that we begin the transition to district elections. In that case, fortunately, upon investigation and with the cooperation of the county elections department, we determined that Mr. Roderick was a Santa Barbara resident, not a Santa Cruz resident, and that he was not registered to vote in the city of Santa Cruz, and therefore he did not have standing to file a CVRA lawsuit. But then more recently, on February 13th of 2020, the city received a demand letter from a different Santa Barbara attorney, which again alleged that the city's at-large system violates the CVRA on behalf of his client, a person named Gabriella Joseph, who, upon an investigation, we determined is in fact a registered voter in the city of Santa Cruz. So in the spring of 2020, the city entered into a settlement agreement with Ms. Joseph, pursuant to which in May of 2020, the city council adopted a resolution of intention to transition to district elections before the November 2022 city council election. We chose November 2022 instead of the 2020 election because had we transitioned to district elections in 2020, we would now be going through the process of redistricting when the 2020 census was issued. So now we'll talk about the why. And I generally try to shy away from speculating about why individual council members vote in favor of or against a particular course of action. But in this instance, I think it's clear that the decision was motivated in major part on the dismal track record of cities that have attempted to fight CVRA lawsuits. And since the World Series is currently underway, to use a baseball analogy, the batting average of agencies that have attempted to fight these lawsuits is 0. And there's one exception of sorts that I will discuss. But since 2016, hundreds of cities and counties and special districts have transitioned to district elections upon a receipt of these demand letters from prospective plaintiffs. And those that have chosen to fight a CVRA claim have all lost in trial court or on appeal and have paid millions in attorney's fees. For example, the city of Highland paid over $1 million to settle its claim. City of Modesto, which aggressively defended the case, paid $3 million to plaintiffs' attorneys and $1.7 million for its own legal fees. The city of Palmdale paid over $4.7 million. Santa Barbara paid $600,000 and then transitioned to district elections. Whittier paid $1 million. The city of Santa Clara lost at trial and on appeal and ended up paying over $5 million for plaintiffs' attorneys and its own legal fees. Sued in 2016 by the Pico Neighborhood Association, which alleged that Santa Monica's at-large system dilutes Latinx voting power in violation of the CVRA. Santa Monica raised a slew of arguments that have been repeated in public comments opposing the city of Santa Cruz's transition to district elections. And I can go through some of those later if people are interested, but I'll just go to the fact that Santa Monica hired outside, very competent, very expensive attorneys and presented these arguments to the trial court and lost. Santa Monica is an outlier because its case was reversed by the Second District Court of Appeal on appeal in July of 2020, but the Supreme Court subsequently accepted the case for review. And while the Supreme Court's decision hasn't been issued, the fact that they accepted it for review is not a great sign in that the court only accepts about 5% of review petitions. And that's usually where there's a split of authority in the district courts. And when the Supreme Court accepted the Santa Monica authority based on the 6th District's decision in the Santa Clara case, but there wasn't at the time that the Supreme Court accepted review. So that's not necessarily an indication that the Supreme Court intends to reverse the case, but it's not a great sign. We've looked at the docket and there have been dozens of amicus briefs filed in support of the plaintiffs and a significant number also filed in support of the city. So it's a very high stakes case, and the outcome will be, we'll set a precedent that will likely determine how these cases go forward in the future. But unless Santa Monica prevails on appeal, it will have to pay plaintiffs' attorneys' fees, which we are told are in excess of $20 million. And we don't know specifically how much Santa Monica has spent on its own attorneys, but the estimates are between $4 and $8 million. So the bottom line is fighting a CVRA case is an expensive and risky proposition in which the downside is millions of dollars in legal fees, coupled with the prospect of the court and the plaintiffs weighing in on the actual drawing of district boundaries rather than having that decision be made within the city. So that's the wherefore, and now Cassie will go over some of the process issues.
All right, yeah, so that's the why, and that was a good explanation. In terms of process, we've already, the city has already had 2 public hearings so far. They were on August 31st and September, a company, National Demographics Corporation, to draft maps that would comply with all legal requirements. And, you know, all the things that Tricia talked about earlier with respect to county redistricting, you know, also apply to the city districting in terms of, you know, geographic contiguity and those types of legal requirements. And so our, you know, consultant is, you know, has done districting and redistricting for, you know, hundreds of municipalities and agencies, and is quite experienced in all the legal requirements. And they actually did the Santa Cruz City Schools redistricting as well, and that process seemed to go pretty well. So right now they have only recently received the census data that would be needed to start on draft district maps. So that data was a bit delayed, but they've got it now, I believe. And draft maps should be published on or around December 31st, 2021. And those will all be made available online. And, you know, in the coming, you know, once that time comes, those will all be online. And I think in the near term, the city's going to have some online tools available to help people, you know, assist in the process and to draw districts and, you know, potentially give their input and suggestions as to what district maps should look like. There will be 2 more public hearings after that map comes out. Those maps come out. The dates have not been determined yet, but they're probably going to be in January and February of 2022. We are estimating that sometime in March of 2022, the council would vote in at the end.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move to the pros and cons, and we've got former Mayor David Terrazas and Council Member Sandy Brown, who are going to do those. And I hope you will give us images. So where are you?
I think if I speak, maybe I move up in your screen. So
There you are,
Sandy's here.
Sandy. Got you. And
I'm here. Yes.
got it.
Thank you for having us this morning.
I picked David.
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay. I want to be able to riff a little. I'm
So
not
let
used to
me give you a little bit of a
Thank you.
bio introduction first, okay? Former Mayor David Terrazas is attorney and a partner in Brereton, Mohammed and Terrazas LLP in Santa Cruz. He previously served 2 terms on the Santa Cruz City Council, 2010 to 2018, and served as the mayor in 2018. He's also on the board of Friends of Santa Cruz Parks and Rec, member of the Sestri Levante Sister City Subcommittee, and past chairperson of the Successful Measures T and U Santa Cruz City Schools Parcel Tax Committee. Let me do Sandy at the same time. Sandy's a longtime Santa Cruz resident, community activist, researcher, and university instructor whose work focuses on labor, community, and environmental activism. She has a BA in politics from UC Santa Cruz and a PhD in geography from UC Berkeley. And she currently teaches, and my screen just lost that last, hold on, whoa. You know what happened on my screen? It just went to 500%. This must be really important, Sandy. She currently teaches at San Jose State University and serves as a member of the Santa Cruz City Council. Thank you for being patient with me today. Okay, David, you're up first.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Laura Lee, for the introductions. Hello, Sandy, and we'll see how we can make this all work. I want to remind you, Tony Condati brought up back in 2017, the CVRA change, and a rash of transitions took place across the state of California from at-large elections to district elections. And in 2018, Sandy was also on the council at the time. We looked at, as a council, trying to get in front of that, to have at least some proactive review of some of these changes that were on the horizon that were affecting cities throughout the state. And so rather than focus on, where we've been, I'd like to just say that the pros of district elections are such that they are a natural transition in our governance and how we look at representative politics. If we look at the city's charter, over time, we've seen a variety of changes in terms of how our city has evolved to create a more effective governance structure. We're currently operating on a charter that was enacted in 1948 that set up our current city manager council form of government with 7 elected members, the mayor and the 6 council members, essentially 7 council members with a rotating mayor. And so as we look at kind of the impacts of current law taking place across the state, and also this resolution that's before us to transition to district elections, I'd just like to discuss the pros of what that means if it is implemented for our system of governance here. And I'd like to kind of break it down into 3 areas: what it means as a candidate, what it means as an incumbent, and what it means for the community. And for me as a candidate, and I think that Sandy can relate to this, running in an at-large election is no easy feat. When you look at how how the election process works, most of the candidates are working family members or parents and others. And so in a district election, running for office is much simpler and less expensive for the candidate. In addition, you're able to prioritize neighborhood endorsements and support. In fact, generally, when you're running in a district, you're going to know everybody in your neighborhood. You're going to know the people that are supporting the candidate, and you become very accessible as a candidate to answer any questions that may come up. In addition, in terms of from the candidate perspective, it encourages new candidates to serve in elected office. It lowers the barriers for those that don't have funds or the time to serve. Also, arguably, it encourages younger candidates, especially working parents, to bring a fresh and present day perspective to local office. These are people that are your neighbors, they're people that are in your community that are able to provide that level of engagement during the election process on what the policy issues you're bringing forward. As an incumbent, I think there's also some benefits that are notable. First of all, as an incumbent, a district election, a district structure provides an opportunity to serve with an appropriate public service work-life balance. In the past, our council has looked at, hey, we need staff. It's very challenging to provide constituent services to a city of our size. And so by having an opportunity to represent a district, you're able to at least create a certain level of balance in between your public service, and for those of us that work and have family, balance in your life so that you're not simply dedicating your entire work week to what public service, which is essential, but also to provide the means to support a family here while you're living in Santa Cruz. In addition, an incumbent benefits by a district election structure because it increases the opportunity and time to focus on specific policy objectives without the need for additional support staff. And it also allows the incumbent to engage in really meaningful constituent services. You're able to kind of be accessible in your own neighborhood, in your own community, to provide direct attention to issues that come up. Oftentimes when I've had the experience of working at large, you tend to be very thinly spread over a variety of different issues. This allows you to focus your time more effectively to address constituent issues in a really meaningful and impactful way. In addition, an incumbent benefits from a district election structure because it allows the electeds to work on larger issues collaboratively, especially those that are involving other jurisdictions. So for example, when you have an issue that comes up that perhaps is one that affects other jurisdictions, it creates an opportunity rather to depersonalize it from a district perspective and look at it from a more citywide perspective, so that the other electeds can work with each other to address issues of community-wide concern without being bogged down in the specific impacts that affect their particular neighborhoods, and look at how they can work together, especially dealing with other jurisdictions that have established maybe impacts that are beyond the city's control to deal with themselves, and creates a path for us to find solutions by working collaboratively from a district perspective. And then third, I'll also say there are benefits with a district election structure for the community itself, the actual neighbors and representatives that are voting for electeds here. First, it creates accountability in the elected's actions, also an identifiable specific representative for policy decisions. When there's an issue that comes up, you know exactly who to go to and who to talk with about what those concerns are in your neighborhood. And you have an advocate that's on the council that's representing your viewpoints from the area where you live and from your district. So that's, for me, it's an important positive attribute of a district election. And a second is that it increases the diversity of policy issues and personal perspectives that you bring to the council. For example, if you have a council that's structured where you have 5 of the members that are in one part of the city, those issues become skewed. You get more focused on what's happening in that part of the city rather than having the diversity, the geographic diversity of issues that are happening in the city. For example, we've seen that there's been issues regarding fire dangers that have affected, let's say, the Upper West Side and parts of the Midtown area. Having council members that have those issues perhaps brings those issues to the forefront sooner, and they're not diluted by maybe other issues that are happening that are in other parts of the city when you have a disproportionate number of council members that are from a specific geographic area. So, in an at-large, if all council members are from a particular part of the cities, as I said, the issues become skewed. And when you bring in new candidates, they bring in new perspectives, both geographically and individually. So for me, that's a really important attribute of district election structures. And then I'll also just end on, from a community perspective, another benefit of a district structured election format is that you are getting better representational government. You have strong constituency representation. It also is going to encourage the constituent services so that you are able to work directly with a more refined body of the community. So you're able to deal directly with a particular district and be available. And then also, as I mentioned, it increases geographic representation. For example, if we were to have a 6 districts in the city, that's roughly equal to the population of the city of Capitola or Scotts Valley, the entire at large. And that's not a small number. And again, people don't realize that our council, this is a public service opportunity here. And we most of the people that do this strictly for that. And so there needs to be an opportunity for us to not only do our job well, but also provide the tools to be successful by making it commensurate with the size of the city and kind of the resources that made it available to them as elected at this time. So that's just generally some background on the pros, and if we were to have Sandy provide some, we're happy to kind of engage. I know Sandy, and we can engage on any other issues that come up afterwards.
Thank you, David. That was great. Sandy.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking forward to that, David. So I'm going to start out by saying, first, thank you for inviting me to be here and for all of the work you do to promote democratic discourse and decision-making and representation of our community. It's wonderful to be here. So I'm going to start out by saying, I don't know if district elections will have an overall positive impact in our community in terms of representation. I don't know. And so I'm not going to be speaking explicitly in opposition to district elections per se. I'm going to talk a little bit about my concerns about the manner in which this issue came to the city. And I'm gonna, and David, a little bit later when I'm moving to the end of my my comments, I'll just say it now, a mea culpa really to David, who was really prescient on the need for the city to get out in front of this. And, we kind of lost track of that. So, and if we had continued in that vein, I think we'd maybe be in a different place right now. So I'll just put that out there first. So as has been noted, and it may be worth repeating, or it was kind of said in a different way, that since the passage of Assembly Bill 350 and the kind of barrage of these lawsuits that have been threatened under the California Voting Rights Act, the many have shifted, right? Hundreds and hundreds of jurisdictions. And because of the cost, right? So really the answer to the why, this is we are up against the potential for massive expense that the city cannot afford. So that's where we're at, we're stuck. But this cap that SB 350 placed on attorney's fees, I think really was the catalyst for a few law firms with differing levels, I think, of integrity, I'll just say, going around the state and really, it set up this context for like a really extortionist approach, because now we have these attorneys finding plaintiffs and saying, here, give us $30,000 and move to district elections and we won't sue you, right? Simple, safe harbor. But and I want to say something, we did get a revised or a new lawsuit, which is the reason that we're moving through this process along the timeline that's been laid out. But I want to just say that just because I think it really it reflects the kind of the environment, the context in which this conversation has played out in different communities. So the initial attorney who found a plaintiff that didn't have standing, couldn't even be bothered to find a plaintiff with standing, has been disbarred, or I guess suspended, not disbarred yet, but suspended pending ethics review in Oregon. He still is a member of the California bar, but is so there's some integrity issues there, right? And what kind of attorney does it, and was really moving through the Santa Barbara area and up the Central Coast with these claims. So I mean, this is the environment that these kinds of decisions are getting made, where it's kind of like a power play and really a way to make money for these attorneys. It's so disturbing and frustrating and really insulting on so many levels. So that's a big problem, I think, because it affects how we decide how we make change, right? So number two, so that's one kind of this context that has been set up that I wanted to raise. And then number two, this is really a solution in search of a problem, I believe, in our community. You know, one of the main proponents of this, Lanny Ebenstein, who is, you know, really at the forefront of these lawsuits, mentoring other attorneys, et cetera, says district elections result in more socioeconomic representation on the council, more diversity on the basis of age, race, ethnicity, people with young children, and geographical representation. And that there's no question that district elections would lead to more diversity on the Santa Cruz City Council. So there's not really evidence, though, of racially polarized voting in our community. It isn't happening. If you look at the evidence, the Latinx community makes up 20.6%, according to the last census. We'll see where we are this time around. 7% of elected officials, elected council members. And yet there is no district that could be drawn that would be representative or would guarantee representation or even really increase the likelihood of representation by the Latino population based on districts. If the purpose is to put a protected class of Latinos in the same district, I don't believe it can be done in Santa Cruz. So in terms of doing this as a response to the lawsuit, it's really a response to the potential loss of, you know, the legal exposure, right? The US Census Bureau, the data shows that the Latinx population in Santa Cruz isn't concentrated in one area of the city. We think about the Beach Flats as kind of an area of concentration, and that is true, but it's not a large enough neighborhood to constitute a district, certainly. So it's really not clear. And as we've already heard, that doesn't matter. So the third area that I want to focus on is that as a part of this process and the way that it's playing out, I worry that we are really missing an opportunity to engage our community in a meaningful way. And this is where I'm going to say it once again, David, you can, I know you may be thinking I told you so, and you didn't say it very politely. But you know, you were really prescient on this matter when you were mayor, and said we should really get out in front of this and let's establish this charter review committee. Let's involve our citizenry and look at a range of possibilities for how we would like to move towards district elections, other kinds of reforms. If we really want to make voting more democratic and ensure the maximum number of votes are counted, there are other alternatives that could also be considered. Ranked choice voting and evaluative proportional representation. And I do want to take just a couple of minutes to talk about that, because it's an idea that I find very interesting. It's not something that is even possible to consider in the environment in which we are now making our decisions, because we are under threat of this lawsuit and in a settlement agreement. We have to do what the plaintiff's attorneys say, which is go to district elections. And so we're just like in this very, very kind of limited, constrained realm of possibility as a result. So I just want to talk about these other alternatives. I know that, again, they're not something that we're going to be able to really explore fully in the public hearing phase of this, or really in the decisions that the city council is kind of under the gun to make. But I think that they are worth talking about if we are talking about district elections as a way to allow for increased participation and better representation, more diverse representation. I don't disagree with any of the things that David said about what district elections could do. I do have some concerns, I'll just mention real quickly, that when you have either at-large or district plurality, votes are diluted, right? Many people's votes really don't even count. And when you have plurality in a district, you can end up with a representative who maybe representing a particular interest within that district, within the neighborhoods. It does create the possibility for an increased kind of for NIMBYism to have a home in elected officials who are representing particular neighborhoods. And we know that this is a big challenge in Santa Cruz for getting things done around development, housing development, economic development, parks, kind of all the neighborhood issues. We have a community that is very active, and to find, and that potentially puts elected representatives in a position of, becoming siloed and kind of really representing those NIMBY interests. And so the view of the whole city, which is really challenging. I mean, we are jack of all trades, master of none, as David said earlier. It's just too much to try to address all of the issues around the city. And I firmly believe that that kind of neighborhood representation makes for, better functioning representation of districts, of community, and it also presents these other challenges. Another issue that is very important to me is what happens to renters. It's already hard enough. I was elected to the city council, and I had to move, and I didn't know if I was going to have to give up my seat because I could not find housing in the city. So while it does allow for some, increased possibility of participation for some, if you don't own your home and you don't have a long-term arrangement and stable housing with your landlord, then it's very hard to think about how that's gonna, help. What we know is a majority of our community move into this kind of to a city council seat. So I'll leave my district's kind of concerns there, and I just want to talk about really quickly ranked choice voting is used in a limited number of communities in the United States. It has higher popularity elsewhere in the world, as does evaluative proportional representation. So this is basically where, in ranked choice voting, you rank all the candidates, and then candidates move up as the votes are sorted, right? But with evaluative proportional representation, every voter can grade. And as a teacher who has to give grades, I don't love doing it, but you grade each candidate based on what you believe is their suitability for office. So you can grade everybody, and the same grade could be awarded to more than one candidate. And then the grades from all the voters are counted, and that would assure that each citizen has a vote that adds to the voting power of any of council members, because the votes are weighted. So whoever gets the highest grade, the most votes, has higher larger proportion of the vote. So it's like, a lot of European systems, and which work quite well, I think, for increasing the diversity of political views and the level of discourse and problem solving. So I think that it's something that we ought to be looking at. These alternative models, they're non-traditional, and it's hard to think about that far outside the box, and we certainly aren't going to be doing it in this context right now between now and March of 22. But it's just something I just wanted to put it out there, because when we think about democracy and representation and good governance, we want to be thinking about what's really going to achieve that. And I think there are better ways that might kind of serve us better, and I'd like to see those discussed in our community moving forward. And I think I'll leave it there and hope that we can have some lively discussion.
Great, thank you. David, did you want to do a counterpoint on any of that before we move to questions and answers?
A respectful counterpoint, yes. I will say that I think that Sandy brought up 3 points. One, she thought that the district elections creates a siloed type of governance. She also referenced that it creates impacts on income, especially she was concerned about renters. And then she also brought up the issue of proportional elections in regards to having more diverse viewpoints. So I'd like to take each of those in regards to our discussion about the pros and cons of district election. And so we've heard this before about the issue of citywide perspectives, that when you have district elections, that it limits that citywide perspective. And so in my opinion, that's kind of a false argument. Whether there's district or at large, serving in elected office requires cooperation and collaboration. And unless you can get the support of your other colleagues, your viewpoints and policies go nowhere. And if you look at our county's operations, they're currently structured in a district. And I think in my mind, and it kind of supports what Sandy just mentioned, is that when you have district elections, it's an opportunity to bring forward new perspectives, not only geographic perspectives, but personal perspectives that affects different parts of our community. For example, in the county, there's issues with agriculture in some parts of the county, or investment in coastal resources, or short-term rentals that affect disproportionate parts of the city. I think having those individual perspectives that are geographically based is really important. And I also feel that it brings forward issues that allow for the cooperation amongst other members to really provide a true citywide perspective that forms what we're looking at in terms of our policy making. So in regards to the second point, and I'll couch it as income, when you say renter versus, the ability of someone to live here, I would argue that it's a struggle for just about anyone who lives here, whether you rent or work. This is not an easy place for families and parents to want to be here in Santa Cruz, working families. Obviously, if you have the resources, it's a wonderful place for everyone. But I mean, it makes it a little easier. The road to path is a little easier. But I would say that serving in elected office creates its own challenges. And by having district elections, it frees up time so that you can actually be employed and make a living. You're not working full time on citywide issues. And, I'd love to hear Sandy's perspective on that, because I think we've had conversation, and I think arguably the district structure would allow a council member to be more effective in their job and maintain a work-life balance, and also maintain their other responsibilities, and actually be more effective in office, essentially. So for a renter, that plays into the fact they're able to maintain a job and maybe seek other employment and able to still maintain their job in public service. And then in regards to the issue of proportional elections, this is my personal opinion. I feel that those types of systems work best when there's a larger voter base, where you're actually able to look at across a wider number of people those issues. And so, like at a statewide level or a congressional district level, maybe that's how you could structure something, bring in different political voices. But I don't think it works well when you're looking at a city, especially a city of our size. I think it would create questionable results. You'll get someone in office you have no idea who it is. It's like a black box in terms of how the voting process works and who would be elected, because it's not as clear who you're voting for. I would therefore support something along the lines where you have like the Board of Supervisors have, where you have a primary vote where you can see who those votes are, so you have a little bit more predictability in terms of, hey, these are the candidates you're getting behind. And it would encourage, as I mentioned earlier, more candidates to run for office initially, and then it provides an opportunity for people to select the most qualified candidates, or the candidates they want to see representing them in office. And for us as a city, I mean, one of the things we talked about back in 2018 was if we were to have district elections in the city of Santa Cruz, and it was set up in a way where 6 of the 7 seats were district, you could still have an at-large mayor elected, which would represent the entire city. And just as I mentioned for the district structure, it creates more accountability, and it creates an understanding of who your representative is, who you're electing for that position. And so you have a little bit more of accountability in those policymaking decisions. and they're not necessarily diluted when you run in an at-large election where it's unclear maybe what those policy positions are because they're nuanced in the campaign vis-a-vis the other candidates that are running for office. I think those were the three issues that Sandy brought up, but I did hear a lot of support from her as well for district elections in terms of how it does create a more representative form of governance, how you have more accountability on a neighborhood basis. And I do feel that the pros outweigh the cons here in terms of how this type of structure would work in a city like ours, because in my opinion, based on my experience, I feel like we do need to look at how our current system is structured in this day and age. People will use a variety of technological resources, email, Zoom, these public meetings. And when you're in an at-large system, you are basically working around the clock to try and address these needs. And having a district will allow an elected member to be more focused in their work and be more accountable and hopefully create the types of results that city residents would like to see moving forward.
Thank you. Thank all of you for speaking this morning.
You might want to give Sandy an equal opportunity for a final comment before you open it up to the public, I think.
Sandy, would you like a final comment?
I'll just be really quick and say, yeah, I don't disagree, David, with your analysis, and I do believe though that a lot of the benefits are really theoretical, and so I'm not in a place where I can say that I think the pros outweigh the cons. I'm not, I'm not arguing against at this point. I wanted to say that your point about how the Board of Supervisors are elected with a primary, and then if, rather than having just a plurality for individual districts, that you do the runoff as needed, would kind of ameliorate some of the, the plurality within a district problem of having a very small, potentially small percentage of voters within a given district then being represented or getting their preferred candidate elected. So I do think that is going to be very important. In terms of the question about work-life balance and effective representation, I'm also on the fence, because I think about my own experience and having now lived in potentially 3 districts, depending on how the lines are drawn, since I was elected. I have my commitments have not changed. So I want to be able to represent, and I could, even if I were elected in a district, but that wouldn't necessarily change my work-life balance, right? I mean, it would, so for candidates who want to be responsive to neighborhood issues, for example, in other parts of town, for me, slow streets and on the Upper West Side, that's not my district, but I thought it was very important. There was a neighborhood significant interest, and I was able to step in and be supportive of that. Just one example. So, I do think that it makes it possible to, not spend as much time and still be effective, but it's not necessarily so. And I could go on, but I'll just leave it there. I'd love to hear questions and try to get some Q&A going. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mike's hands up right away. What's up, Mike?
I have a question if you're calling on me. So my question is to Tony Condotti, or the
Before you do,
oh wait, sure.
Tony and Trisha sort of let us you again.
Sure.
There you go. All right, go ahead, Mike. Thanks, guys.
So this is my question, and it's a legal question, but also kind of a political issue about the courts, I guess. So I've tried to draw district lines in the past. This was a long time ago, and the issue wasn't racial issues, but the idea that there were no conservatives on the council, and if we drew district boundaries, that if there were at least the conservatives would have 1 seat or 2 seats on the city council. And then so I tried to draw lines to, like, well, can you make conservative districts in the city of Santa Cruz? And while I was at it, can you make racial, can you do something to enhance the diversity on the council in terms of race, and so forth? And frankly, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I couldn't, and this is back to Sandy's point, I couldn't find a prima facie case that, that you can make districts that actually would empower a Latinx part of the community. Beach Flats is not only a small neighborhood, but it's got a very low registration rate because of undocumented folks and the fear of even those that are documented, that they'll out members of their family for whatever reason. So what I'm trying to understand legally in terms of like, why are these cases winning? Why is there a 0 success rate for people challenging them? Given that, I mean, couldn't you go to court on I'm not an attorney, but on a summary judgment or somewhere early in the process to have a court say, they haven't got a cause here. They're suing us because we don't have racial diversity, and they're proposing a solution that won't give us racial diversity. In fact, ironically, I'd say racial diversity, we look at our council right now in that large system, we've got, I think, 4 people of color, maybe I got the number wrong, but something in that line. A mixed race or actual, representing, identify as African, 2 who identify as African American, and others multiracial. So, or 3, I don't know the exact numbers. So my question is sort of, can't we go to court and say, like, hey, these guys are suing us because we don't have racial diversity, but what they're proposing is not going to give us less racial diversity. Students at the university who often have a big impact on the university will get us more Latinos elected than if their votes are not stuck in one district. They have the ability to get people of color, across the city by the numbers that they throw into the election. So I guess that's a question to Tony or his colleague. Why are we losing these suits? Why don't we take the risk of challenging them? Again, I understand I don't want to throw millions of dollars away on a losing bet, but why is it a losing bet?
I'm going to ask Cassie to weigh on this because she's worked more closely with the demographer. From my perspective, Santa Cruz is a unique community in many ways, but demographically, we're not that unique compared to a lot of other cities in California. And then I'll ask Cassie to weigh in here.
Yeah, so all the arguments you've put forward are good, and they are the same arguments put forward by Santa Monica, really. And Santa Monica's Latino population is even smaller than Santa Cruz is, and they had made the same arguments. The Pico neighborhood is too small. It couldn't actually be a district. It wouldn't result in a majority minority district, and so they are where they are right now in the litigation, and also they had even more Latino representation both on their council and within other, commission positions and that sort of a thing. So there's a good argument to be made that they have an even stronger case in the city of Santa Cruz, at least just based on pure demographics.
What do the courts say? Why are the courts? What's the argument of the court for why those arguments are not valid or don't carry much weight?
The courts are pointing to a lot of the things that David talked about. And it's some of the points you made. It's not just about getting people of color on the council, right? It's about getting a representative. It's about giving more voting power to minorities, and those are slightly different things, right? So, for example, if we did go through with a lawsuit, the argument is going to be that, hey, if we went to districts, while the Beach Flats might not be big enough to be its own district by itself, it could be joined with another, nearby neighborhood. And, we might be at about 50% Latino population. And by the way, they're looking at the population, not necessarily the registered voters, right? So there's a lot of ways that impacts. So like what David's talking about, like, well, okay, if we are at, 50% Latino population, then maybe maybe more people will actually run, right? Because it's a smaller district and it's not so intimidating. It doesn't cost actually so much money to get a candidate off the ground, and maybe, so these are the sorts of arguments that are made. And basically what the court said, there's no clear decision right now in the Santa Monica case, right? So the appeals court voted with you, right? So they lost in the trial. Santa Monica lost in trial court, and then the appeals court agreed with you, Mike. But then the Supreme Court said, no, we're not so sure about that. And we're just all waiting on the Supreme Court to say, what does it mean to violate the California Voting Rights Act? What does it mean to have, minority voter dilution in these types of circumstances? And so I think we're going to learn more about that. And it's really interesting for people who have legal backgrounds or are just interested in these types of things. You can read all of the briefs and the amicus briefs on this case, and there's tons of them that talk about both legal reasons and policy reasons as to both sides of the case. So I can post links to that in the chat box as well for more reading. But
Please do. That would be helpful.
yeah, so there's I'll post that right now. So that's the best answer I can give. Maybe Tony can add to that.
I would just add that I'm not aware of any CVRA case that has been litigated that has been resolved on summary judgment. I think most cases have settled after a period of time, and those that have gone to trial, those that haven't have gone to trial. So it would be very challenging, to say the least, to prevail on a motion for summary adjudication, just given the status of the case law that has been litigated thus far.
Thank you, Tony. Sandy had a comment.
If I could just say one thing about this, absolutely, that's what the record shows, right? And the reality is that it doesn't matter if rational. It's not a rational response. The CVRA has become a blunt instrument for dealing with a problem that may or may not exist. And you don't have to even prove it exists under the CVRA, the way it's been interpreted by the courts thus far. So you don't even have to prove it. You just have to make the charge. And, the evidence shows you're not going to win, no matter how much evidence you have. So far, that is the question that some of us, at least, are hoping the Supreme Court will consider: the actual evidence of, is it happening, and would this create, really not even, maybe Tony and Cassie, you could correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if it actually, they're going to talk about whether or not it's an actual remedy, but certainly that you have to prove that the way things are, the at-large system is, diluting minority vote. Well,
yes, that's right. We hope that the Supreme Court gives some clarity that would guide the process going forward. The standard currently is not, by default, you have to switch to district elections. There has to be an evidentiary basis to allege that there's racially polarized voting. But the burden of proof in that regard has been set fairly low by the legislature in amending the CVRA. I might also add that even the Supreme Court decision is not going to be the final answer on this question. The court could issue a nuanced decision that leaves everybody's head scratching as to how to interpret the CVRA going forward. Or if it goes against the plaintiffs in the Santa Monica case, given the legislative support for the plaintiffs, there could be further amendments to the CVRA to nullify the decision.
Thank you all. Thank you for that. And just to remind folks, the CVRA is the California Voting Rights Act. And also to point you to the chat, there's a lot of links that Cassie and Tricia posted to give you more information, and a couple other comments that showed up there. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Rusty.
Who?
Oh, you.
Okay. Kind of following up on Mike's question. So over the years, when this question has come up, the issues have been sort of East Santa Cruz versus West Santa Cruz. And of course, putting all the students in one district. So what would be the likely consequence? Would the West Side end up with more districts? Could, in fact, all the student vote end up in one district?
Well, that in and of itself wouldn't be a legal basis to establish a district under the CVRA, because it speaks directly to racially polarized voting. However, I do think there are possible district scenarios that would put the university as part of a single district. And again, ask Cassie to weigh in here because she's spoken a lot more with the demographer.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So the city, we have some updated stats on the city. I think the current population is, if I recall, about 62,000. And right now we are moving toward, well, what was going to be proposed is going to be a 7-district system. And so that means that there's going to be about 8,000 people per district. And so, and then this is something that the demographer also talked about. And the total population of, I think, UC students on campus is actually somewhat around that, as was counted in the census. So it could be that, you know, that is sort of its own district, but I think it's also just too early to say, you know, what our demographer is going to come up with. And he's going to come up with a variety of different options for the council to consider as well.
What about east versus west?
I haven't thought about that enough to give you an intelligent response. I'm sorry.
I can say that the Latino population is not broken down east versus west. If you look at the demographics, it's not like there's more Latinos on the east side, and therefore, you know, you get more likely to have higher concentration. I mean, I guess just by, you know, experience and anecdotally, Lower Ocean and the Beach Flats together will have a slightly higher Latino population than other places, but it's not enough higher to sort of, on the face of it, create a Latino district where you even have a 50% chance of being elected based on the population.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hands raised. Sally?
Thanks. So I get that the district elections are coming, you know, they've got advantages. There are some problems that need to be thought about. It's coming no matter what because of the lawsuit thing. But I guess the more kind of creative solutions that Sandy was suggesting, are those precluded in the future? If we went to district elections, could that ranked voting happen within a district, or would it be, could it be proposed as an alternative later on, you know, as a citywide thing? Or is it just like, we're in this lawsuit world now and any other creative solutions is out of the picture?
So I can answer that question. Things like ranked choice voting or 6 districts with an at-large mayor in primary elections, those kinds of decisions can be made, and they are options to consider. But the remedy that's specified by the Voting Rights Act is district elections. And so that is the process that we're going through under threat of litigation. And it's also worth bearing in mind that the city charter specifies that elections are at large. And for the city to consider one of those other options, it would be by a charter amendment. So it is a possibility. It's just not a possibility under the process that we're under today.
I would just add that the cities that are using ranked choice right now are ranked within districts. So they've gone to districts and then they've incorporated ranked choice on top of that. So that is certainly an option that could be employed, but that would require an update to the charter.
Thank you. Sandy, do you want to add to that comment?
Just all I want to say is, and this is exactly the reason that I did the mea culpa with, you know, the charter review committee that we had was looking at, you know, a wider range of possibilities, maybe more nuanced transition. And so we've kind of just cut off the possibility for that conversation because we're now under the gun with this lawsuit. So that was kind of why I thought, you know, backing off on it was a mistake in hindsight.
Thank you. Linda Wilshusen has her hands up. Hi, Linda.
Hi there, thank you. Understanding that given the lawsuit, we're pretty limited in our choices, and I'm not a resident of the city of Santa Cruz, but certainly interested in what's going on there. I have a question about the number of districts, and I don't know what the assumption is right now, or if fewer districts than, sounds like maybe fewer districts than 7 is under consideration, but I'm curious what people think about that and what the thinking is on the council right now.
As in like 5 districts instead or something.
So our
Well, to take-
charter, I'll just give some legal background and then you guys can debate the policy. So our charter provides for 7 council members. So right now we're looking at 7 districts. We could, so that's kind of the path that we're moving toward, but if we wanted to do a charter amendment, there are other possibilities, such as, having 6 districts and an at-large mayor. That is a choice that some cities have made, or even potentially going down to a smaller council and having 5 districts and 5 council members. So, but that would all require a charter amendment.
Any comments from David or Sandy, Tony on that?
I mean, Linda had asked specifically what the current council feels about this. I'm not aware of what their perspective is, but I do think having maybe a 6-member or 6-district city that's roughly the size of Capitola, number of constituents that are there with an at-large elected, directly elected mayor is something to consider. And even at one point, we looked at whether or not having a 5-member council. If you did that, maybe you look at current structure to increase maybe the resources that are available to the council and look at it more similarly to how the Board of Supervisors is, not necessarily to that level, but some level of resources that are allocated if you have that, so that you have a larger area and you're able to perform your duties with the available resources to be successful.
You're talking about pay and or aids or something.
Exactly. Yeah, I think having some sort of looking at having support that's assigned. And we looked at that back in 2018 as part of the Charter Amendment Committee, looking at not only the workload of the councils, but also the governance structure. So, but I'm interested to hear what Sandy has to say.
So, well, I don't really know. I mean, honestly, we've had many discussions, the council, about this, mostly in closed session, and a few now out, at public meetings. And, it's not clear to me where the council will land. I'm not even sure, where I'm going to land. I think that's, as we begin to look at the maps and hear more from the demographer and have an opportunity to have those discussions in the light of day, we'll hopefully get a better understanding. And so I think folks who are interested in this issue should really engage and tell us what you think we ought to be doing. My sense is, in my read of the tea leaves, again, given the circumstances under which this has been brought to us, that we're kind of, the inclination seems to be towards the simple fix, which is just doing what the attorney, just settling and going to district elections. It doesn't require a charter amendment and a vote of the people. It doesn't require any thinking outside the box. And I mean, that's not to say that, we don't want to think outside the box, or the council wouldn't, but just under the circumstances to, make sure to reduce our exposure. That's just seems to be the way things are going to go. I would like a more robust community conversation before we make that decision. But that's just seems to be where we're kind of headed by default, unfortunately.
Mike brought up the issue of what resources means, and I'm just wondering if one of you would sort of give a sense of what a council member makes versus a supervisor, and sort of the time you put in. So it's not a full-time job, but it really seems to be. So can somebody give us a sense of the difference?
Sure. Well, council members earn $18,000 a year-ish. Plus small, we get, I mean, it's a very generous health insurance that we get. And pension for those who end up vesting, Mike can tell you about that. Cynthia, maybe if you're still here.
You have to be at least two terms to get anything.
Oh, right.
And then if you want anything that really matters, I stayed 26 years before I got something, and it's not that much, but it's something.
So, right. And I don't know exactly what county supervisors earn, but it's like 140,000, something like that, plus 2 legislative aides who work directly for you.
Do you have staff on the council?
No.
And is it almost a full-time job, part-time job, X hours a week?
It depends on how seriously how much effort you want to put in there. There's some, we have wide latitude there, really. But for me, it is when it's on, it's a full-time job. But we meet every other week and we have time off. So I'd say I probably spend, maybe 30 hours a week if you average it out.
So thank you, because I think that was one of the important issues that's sort of behind all this. It might be nice to be talked about a little more directly at some point.
It's a minimum half-time job, but many council members make it a full-time job. Yeah. Although as pointed out, if that's the only thing you do, you're living on $18,000.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
I have one for Tricia if nobody else has them, but I'll wait for others.
Mike, you get to go.
So I wanted to ask Tricia, I'd heard rumors that the city of Santa Cruz had a little bit too much. You pointed out that our differences are not huge. We're not forced to do very much, but I'd heard rumors that there was a surplus of population in the city in the 3rd district, not just the city, in the 3rd district, and a somewhat lower number in the 5th district. So Ryan seats the 3rd district and Bruce McPherson's the 5th. That therefore there was going to be Bruce McPherson's district, not if he doesn't own it, but the 5th district would come more into the city of Santa Cruz. Right now it comes into Ocean Street and River Street and the side streets that go off of those, but that it was somehow might expand further into the city on that side of town. Is there any, in terms of what's being discussed, does that come up, or is that just a ridiculous, given the internet, I don't know if there's any truth to the whole thing, but I've heard that rumor.
So you're correct. The 3rd district went up in population by just over 2,000 people. The 5th district went down in population with just over 2,000 people. And so both of them had about a 3.8% change. So there was conversation in the redistricting commission about changing the 5th district and 3rd district lines. One of those proposals was to come further down on Ocean Street and encompass the county building where I'm sitting. So it would take the county building over onto Dakota and I think it's the San Lorenzo apartment complex, and to use the river as the natural boundary. The other proposal was to go up Hagar. So there is up by the university, faculty housing is in the 5th district. The remainder of UCSC is in the 3rd district. And then the 5th district also goes along High Street and takes, so Estates and Longview and those streets up there are also in the 5th district. So the proposal was to go on to Hagar and make that the dividing line. So those would go into the 5th district and the rest would stay in the 3rd. Neither of those proposals passed out of the redistricting commission to go to be presented to the board. That doesn't mean they're off the table. It just means that they were not in the draft maps that the commission presented to the Board of Supervisors. And I will just say, my office had a little problem with the change on Hagar because it was following the census blocks instead of following the street. So what it did is it took this little turn on a service road and went back around, and it ended up bisecting through two housing buildings in Crown College. And I don't like that. One of my biggest beefs with the city of Santa Cruz line, and I'm really sorry, is that it goes right through one of the dorms. So half of the one side of the hall is in the city and one side of the hall is out of the city. And it's extremely difficult to explain to students why their neighbor over there has one ballot and they have another. And so we pointed that out to the commission and said, can you just pull it back onto the road instead of bisecting through there? And I don't know what that did to their population numbers, but that, like I said, that proposal didn't move forward.
Thank you. Rusty has his hand up.
Simple question. How many of the students on the campus vote in Santa Cruz and how many vote back in their home places?
That's a great question. Right now, there's 467 active voters up at UCSC.
Oh, 400 out of 8,000. Wow. Well, that's not a very big number at all.
Well, a lot of, because there was not on campus housing for a lot of students on campus during the last year, a lot of students ended up reverting their registrations back to where they currently were at the time that the elections were going on.
What was pre-COVID like?
Much more.
Oh, interesting.
But, you know, around 1,000.
But if you go back to the late 70s, early 80s, it was about 80% of the students in a couple of elections, 80% of the students registered in Santa Cruz, who lived on campus, who were eligible to vote. You have to keep in mind that there's a lot of frosh live on campus and many of them are under 18 years old. So the question is what time of year and so forth, but there used to be there have been much more organizing in the past on campus to register students to vote here rather than elsewhere. And those registration numbers definitely do go up when we get closer to city elections, but it's a lot less now than it used to be. It's also worth pointing out, because sometimes people think, well, students totally run the city elections. For all throughout the 70s, 80s until the middle 90s, the student vote was about 12% of the voters in the city of Santa Cruz. Not half, not a third, 12.5%, 14%, depending on the election.
Thank you. Linda, did you have another question? Your hand's up over there.
I had a question for Tricia, and it was about the issue of city representation by supervisorial district. And there were some requests, as I understand, that the smaller cities and possibly also the larger cities, although I know it's a little more challenging with Santa Cruz in particular, to have them be in the same district, in a single district rather than divided up. And apparently the board has had a understanding or a policy, the Board of Supervisors, to always have the city be shared by two districts. And I'm really wondering, number one, why that wasn't addressed more seriously, and whether there can be a more robust explanation of that in the summary of the redistricting effort. And number two, next time when we consider this, which I guess will be in 10 years, in a different context than we had to this time, whether or not that issue could be addressed.
So I can only tell you what I know. I am actually not a part of redistricting. I am the end product of redistricting, of what they end up doing. And so I only sit in those commission meetings and up at those hearings to answer questions specifically related to what we need when we get it. Like, for example, when a line goes through a parcel and or the line goes through a building, what that means to us when we're attempting to try to register someone to vote, and the process that we have to go through to ensure they're getting the right ballot. So I can only tell you that it's my understanding that it was decided many years ago, prior to 10 years ago, when they moved Scotts Valley from one district to two, that the boards felt that, and I say plural because it was at the time, and it's been through several board changes, that it was more beneficial to an area like a city to have multiple people speak for them instead of just one. And it also gave more equal say across both the urban and the rural areas, that there was each district had both, so they would be able to see both sides of the street, so to speak. I know that it was brought up in several of the meetings. I don't know, or the public workshops and in the community of interest forums. I don't know why the commission didn't want to try to move the lines in order to do that, other than it was a massive change, and with this compressed time frame, they were a little concerned about having adequate time to discuss it and bring it out into the public to make such a massive change, especially when the numbers were so small that they were just going to tweak a little here and there. And I can say that at the last meeting, people were saying that most likely in the next 10 years, we're going to see a much larger change in our population, and that we would most likely have more time, because usually we get 4 months, 5 months, 6 months to do this redistricting process, there would be more time to look at making those more representative changes, and like putting cities back into one district, or making UCSC in multiple districts, or whatever those discussions are.
Did anyone else want to make a comment on that? Seeing none. Any other questions before we close our session, Mike?
I would just ask our speakers if they have maybe a very brief last comment they'd like to make. I appreciate they're all showing up at our conference this morning. I'll leave it to you to call them if they have things to say.
Okay, why?
I would just like to say thank you for your attention, and it was a privilege to be able to speak with you today, and maybe look forward to doing it again sometime in the future.
Anyone else with closing comments? David, Sandy, Cassie, Tricia?
Sure, I'll jump in and say again, thank you for having us this morning. It was a very interesting discussion. I appreciated also the perspective on even representation at the district level and what's happening there with the districts. You see, as a general county, some other counties look at expanding the number of seats on their boards to address those issues of representation. And what we're going on here in the city is, I think, it's a natural transition to provide better representational government.
Thank you. Sandy?
I just wanted to say thank you for having me. It was a pleasure to engage in the dialogue. I've put the City of Santa Cruz district elections website up there. I encourage you all to check it out and participate in the upcoming meetings. And when those maps come out, hope to have more conversation about how we move forward.
Thank you. Tricia, did you have any closing comments?
I just wanted to mimic everyone else and say thank you very much for letting me be here and sharing your morning with me and letting me speak on this. And at the very beginning is when I put in the county's redistricting website and the 2 remaining public hearings that are currently scheduled. The county has a December 15th deadline. However, they're aiming to have it get the lines adopted prior to December the 6th, because that way the candidate filing period for supervisor will align with the candidate filing period for everyone else. If they go later, then if they adopt after that date, then their candidate filing will start after everyone else's does. So that's their plan.
Thank you. Cassie?
Just thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you all. And I actually really enjoyed Sandy and David's back and forth talking about more of the policy back and forth as to whether or not this would be good. And thank you guys so much.
Thank you all, and thank Mike Rockton for putting this together. Thank you, Mike. We have another awesome program coming up on November 20th. And so we're going to look at the Build Back Better legislation and the midterm prospects, midterm election prospects with Congresswoman Panetta confirmed and Anna Eshoo invited, and hope to get her confirmed as well. Mike, did you have any closing comment to make?
Just that I'll leave this on for about 5 minutes so people can take stuff off of the chat. There is definitely some useful stuff there. And I'll leave that open and then we'll close the call down. Thank everybody for their participation. And we do not take it for granted that this is a civil space for people to have communication, given what goes on the internet. I want to appreciate everybody's participation this morning.
Thank you all.
Good night, all. Goodbye. Good day. Check my email. Okay. I have my key.
Vanessa, I see you're still on the call here. Our club endorsed your candidacy and voted to give you $100 for your campaign. And I don't know if you're still hearing me or if you're still in front of your camera, but you can contact us if you'd like to get more detailed information about that. You're muted, so I can't hear your comment.
And maybe people will tell other people that we've endorsed you and stuff.
Okay, I'm actually, I'm talking to Carol right now. Carol, I'm talking to Mike on the Zoom. I'm trying to simultaneously talk to you both. Okay, bye. Sorry about that. Yeah, I was actually just typing you a message and then Carol called me and I'm trying to do 3 things at once. But I can go ahead and give you my information. So whatever you need from me, and maybe that can be sent out to members. Or if any members who are still here have any questions for me, I can go ahead and answer questions.
Let me give you my email first.
Okay. Sure.
It's OpenUp, OPENUP.
Would you be able to put it in the chat so I can just copy and paste it?
Yeah, hold on, I'll do it right now. NUP at ucsc.edu. Oh no, not to Laura Lee. Let's make sure it goes to everybody. Okay, it's coming to you. Return. That's there. And so what we need, more than anything else, your FPPC number, because we can't donate money to anyone that doesn't have one of those. I assume you got that for your campaign. And your name, obvious stuff, your name, address, your occupation and your employer. And let me think if there's anything else we need. I think that's just in case, send us your email and a phone number just so we have it. But the critical things are that FPPC number and the information about the campaign, probably your treasurer's name, or where can we send you money? That's something. And so whatever the address, either it's your address or your treasurer's address. The name I should make this obvious. The name of your campaign, which may not just be your name.
Yeah, so all that information is in my email, and I can go ahead and shoot you an email right after we log off here and get you that ASAP.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
and good luck in your race, and let us know if there's other things we can do. You're now free to use. We'll send you a written verification, which is always smart as a candidate to get from people, so they don't tell you later, oh, we never did that. No, but you can use our endorsement in any of your literature or anywhere else you like. It's the Democratic Club of Santa Cruz County, Democratic Women's Club of Santa Cruz County.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much. All right.
Okay, that's my 5 minutes. I'm going to shut this thing down.
Okay.
Bye, Karen.